Welcome back to another episode on the Cerebral Cricketer podcast. Today we have a very, very special guest on the show. Curtis Campher is a key all-rounder for Ireland who has made waves since his debut in 2020. Born in South Africa, he's known for his grit, versatility, and a big match temperament. So Curtis, welcome to the show.
Cheers, thanks so much for having me. Yeah, it's nice to be on, and quite a long introduction for a person that doesn't really think about that much. But yeah, very kind words. Thank you.
I appreciate your time. There's so much to talk about, especially with your career, the opponents you've come up against, and the victories you've had along the way. There's a lot to talk about there. But I guess to get an idea of your background and who you are as a cricketer, it's always good to kind of start off at your journey as a youngster. So I noticed that I think you were born in South Africa, grew up in South Africa, lived in Johannesburg. So I just wanted to get an idea of what your life was like in Johannesburg when you were young.
Yeah, so obviously, grew up there from a young age, born and bred, and then literally just grew up pretty much similar to Australia. A lot of backyard cricket. I had an older brother, so there was always some tough lessons in the backyard, bowling a lot of times, and not really batting that much. So I think that's where the all rounder kind of comes from is genuinely just being in the back garden and having to bowl so much, and then when you get the break to bat, making sure you use your time wisely and kind of just snuggling in there. But yeah, no, I grew up. I loved it. I was really fortunate to go to a really good cricketing school. Go to St Stithians is probably the best and the hallmark of cricket in South Africa. Having to grow up and a couple of years above me was KG Rabada, and then in my team, it was crazy to think of all the names we've got. I've got I played with Ryan Rickleton, Vian Mulder, Ricardo Vasconcelos, who's at Northants, Brandon Glover, who's a Dutch international and played for Durham and Northants too. And then we have five or six domestic cricketers all in the same in two or three age groups. So growing up there with high school was crazy to have the level of standard of cricket playing in that first team as a school team, let alone as a provincial team and an underage team was crazy to kind of have them going to under 19 World Cups and playing and bringing back that kind of experience was definitely kind of the foundation of where I kind of learned my cricket.
There's a lot to unpack there. So in terms of, for example, when you were a youngster before you sort of went to school, you mentioned playing cricket in the backyard. Has that sort of shaped you? Was for example, someone from your family, or maybe it could be a parent or someone else or an uncle that really nurtured that love for cricket within you? Or was it just sort of natural because you're playing with, I don't know, your friends and that's kind of the sport you're playing? So what was that journey like when it comes to nurturing that love for cricket from a young age?
Yeah, I think obviously my family was really key on me not just playing one sport. So when I grew up and went to primary school, that you played everything. So my dad comes from a background of golf, was an ex pro, and my mom played a decent level of tennis. So I think they're always open to kind of playing all different sports. And I think that as a youngster is probably the best way to develop is getting out there and playing all the sports and seeing what you really love. And then obviously cricket and hockey were my main two, and my main lead probably would have been my brother. Always, being a younger brother to him, I always looked up to him and playing in the back garden, playing anywhere really. When his mates came over, when my friends came over, it kind of just had that rivalry and that competition. And I think that's kind of definitely what shaped me in the beginning is just being really competitive. And him being 4 years older, obviously, it's a little bit tougher on a younger kid, but it definitely makes you grow up stronger, and definitely was one of the reasons why I can kind of say I am where I am today.
That's really interesting. You mentioned that with your parents. I actually noticed many. I don't know what the percentages are, but a lot of pro cricketers, I've felt like the ones I've had conversations with, it's always been someone, it could be their parent or their dad or their mom, being either a sports player or being really into a sport and kind of helping their kid through that journey of cricket in this particular case. So for yourself, you said that your dad was a golf ex-pro golfer, and your mum was a tennis player as well. So it's interesting that you took cricket. So I also found we see from the case of AB de Villiers, we know that he's played a lot of sports. I think was it Astral Prince or Herschel Gibbs? A lot of South Africans have played a lot of different sports as well. So what my question would be is that was the love of cricket natural in the sense that your parents, because of their experience in other sports, allowed you to kind of play other sports, and then you sort of found your love for cricket naturally, or did you feel like they kind of steered you in that direction of a cricket career because of their own sports, past?
Yeah, actually, it's crazy to think. So when I was 16, I was in the S under 18 hockey camps, and that was kind of my tipping point where I probably would have loved, or I probably would say I was a little bit better at hockey than I was at cricket at that stage. And I got selected to a S under 17 training camp and for cricket, and they said, listen, this is going to be on during the whole winter, so you can't really play much hockey, and we don't want you getting injured. So then I had to have a sit down with my family, and actually a family friend who's an agent in South Africa, and he just said, listen, you're equally talented both. Go do what you want to do, but if you want to make a career out of one's a professional sport in South Africa, and one isn't a professional sport in South Africa. So I actually ended up going with cricket because I loved both equally, but I'd say I was slightly better at hockey than I was at cricket at that stage. And yeah, so that was kind of how I picked the love, or just decided to go down one route of one sport rather than the other.
I actually played field hockey myself as well. What sort of have you found that aspects of field hockey helped you with cricket as well? It could be with coordination or the team camaraderie or that kind of nature of hockey, or it could be anything, to be honest. But what aspects of hockey did you feel helped your cricket game?
Oh, definitely the sweeps, 100%. I think just the nature of getting low and having to slap the ball around, and drag flicking and that kind of stuff definitely made my sweeping game a lot better. I think being comfortable being low to the ground, getting your head where your head shouldn't really be, and kind of just being able to ramp and reverse sweep and sweep and stuff like that. It's very, very kind of similar movements, but I think that's in general when you have cross sport, like I wouldn't say contamination, but like when you do two different sports, you can be able to like pull different skills from different sports, and I think that's why growing up playing different sports is such a key thing because if you're just a person that just plays cricket and you only know cricket, then eventually you can kind of like that's all you know. But if you can do another sport and get something from another sport that can make you better in that individual sport, then it's a massive boost for you. And like there's different cultures and different people and different skill sets that you need in different sports that come in handy in cricket too.
There's so many things to unpack. Because it's really interesting because you're also talking about your experience and the sweep shot. So I might pivot because we're on that topic to because what I've noticed, especially watching your highlights as well as looking through your scorecards, is that you've also done really well in spin friendly conditions as well. And so it's really interesting that you brought up the sweep shot and all that, and then we're talking about hockey. Interesting enough, and because for example, there was a time when in an ODI match against Afghanistan, Abu Dhabi, he scored 47 runs, facing world class bowlers like Rashid Khan, Mujib, Mohammad, Nabi. Is it the sweep shot something you've just naturally always worked at from a young age, and it comes easier to you? Especially, I guess, with the advent of T20 cricket, we see a lot more of that. Being used like reverse sweeps and sweeps, and I know you have the paddle shot as well. So are those aspects of your game when it comes to playing the sweep shot honed in from a very young age, complemented with your hockey, and then that's why you feel that you're able to do well against like world class bowlers like spinners from Afghanistan, for example. Like I'm just curious to understand your sort of relationship with the sweep shot in that sense and how it allows you to succeed in these kind of conditions as well.
Yeah, obviously, I do think it does give me an added benefit because I feel more comfortable. I think obviously because I'm short in stature too, I'm a little bit lower to the ground, so it is a little bit easier than a bigger like 6'4" guy to get down and sweep. But I definitely feel more comfortable there, and it's something that I drill a lot. It's a like a non-negotiable for me. Is that I have to practice that loads because sometimes you can feel like it's a massive strength and then you put the training away to the side and then all of a sudden you start getting out to it or you don't hit it as well. And then you keep going to it because you know it's your strength. But I just make sure that I can like roll back the basics and I do a lot of drop down feeds and a lot of just like guys just throwing some off spin and some left arm spin and just kind of getting comfortable of it's a natural shot for me. In T20 cricket, it'll be a little bit more premeditated to find a boundary option. But in like the longer format, it will be on pure line and speed. Yeah, just something that I can read in the air. So I'd say it's a little bit more natural than in T20 cricket. You're kind of forced into it.
And what would your game plan be? In this case, I brought up, your 47 runs against
Yeah.
Afghanistan. Like, are you actively trying to? You mentioned premeditating sweep shot in, the shorter format of the game. Is that what you're actually actively trying to do, or is there other game plans, involved in that sense?
Yeah, so obviously in ODI cricket it's a little bit different because we have only four players out. So when you're looking at there, then they either got to have a mid off or mid on up, and two guys back or three guys back on the leg side. So there's always normally they will normally start two straight and two square. So then it's either a paddle sweep or a fine sweep or a slog sweep. So then I'll actively be looking for a ball that's over pitch to slog sweep. It's a little bit different when you're facing Rashid Khan because I find like he has two different paces. He'll start off in an ODI a little bit slower and trying to spin the ball and trying to like bring both edges in. And especially in that game, I find it a little bit easier in the day games to read him than it is in the night games. I don't know, just the visuals or what it is. But he'll go slightly slower in the ODIs. And then if you start to get on top of him, he goes to this back of a length like 95 kph to 100 k's, and it's just like fast spin, and you can't sweep it because it's genuinely like belly button high. But it doesn't feel short, and you kind of gets like through you. So then obviously in ODI cricket you can try sponge that, but it's really hard to get him away. And he goes into this like default T20 setting of bowling fast, and then goes away from trying to take wickets. Whereas in the first like 4 or 5 overs of his spell, if it is spinning, he'll go slower and try and beat you and try and get you out.
And when he is trying to bowl it quick, are you trying to play him like a pacer? Like, what's the strategy in that specific situation?
Oh, obviously, it's a little bit more like situation dependent. If we were setting there and the average totals were about like winning totals were about 260, so you didn't actually have to try put your foot on him, and try hit some boundaries, so you could sponge and kind of take singles where they were due. And we know the stats show that if he doesn't take wickets in an ODI, even if he goes 10 overs for 20, you got a high percentage or high probability of winning the game. So I think a lot of the times we just sit on him. But then it is crazy when you have a guy like Majib, who's like a completely different threat with a newer ball. I was chatting to Sterlo about this when we first moved on, and he's the type of guy that he bowls fast and has bounce, so you don't actually use your feet. You kind of just play him from the crease, and then you just wait for his variations. And because he gives you enough pace, you can always get through the gaps to get your singles. But someone that goes, I think one of the better. I'd say Rashid Khan would definitely be one of the best spinners I've faced, but in terms of finger spin, Mohammad Nabi, he still baffles me how much variation he has because when you just look at him on TV, you think, oh, he's just a regular off spinner, like spins it in a little bit. But when he has an undercutter, he has a ball that swings away, and there's not much tell in his action. So it's a bit tricky because I still play him loads in the white ball formats, but yeah, they don't call him president for nothing. Yeah, he knows your moves all the time, and yeah, I find in those conditions when he is spinning the ball, he finds a way to bowl balls that don't spin on purpose, which is probably the hardest thing as a batter when there's no real tell and the ball's landing in the same area and some are ragging and some aren't.
Yeah, like I always found Mohammad Nabi, obviously is well respected as all rounder around the world, but he goes a little under the radar because of Rashid Khan, even the likes of Mujib, because Mujib has a certain way of bowling where I guess it's more intriguing for some viewers as opposed to Mohammad Nabi. As you mentioned, it kind of looks like he's doing the same thing, but there's a lot more happening when you kind of look beneath the surface. So that's really interesting you bring that up as well, because I think Will Basisto or someone else that I interviewed said a very similar thing about Mohammad Nabi as well. That he's tricky in that sense as well. And when I'm not sure if you faced the Afghanistan spinners only in Abu Dhabi, were there other places around the world in other conditions where you played them where you felt that in the sense of it could be, I don't know, bouncier conditions in maybe center countries where you can't exactly be able to play the sweep shot in the orthodox way that you would in maybe in subcontinent conditions because of the bounce? Was there any kind of situation we had to adjust, even though it's the same ball and maybe you've played them, but then you feel like, okay, the conditions are different. I can't just kind of do the same game plan that I did with him in other conditions. Therefore, I have to adjust. So I'm not sure if you had that kind of situation as well with those kind of spinners.
Yeah, so obviously when we play them at home, obviously it's not bouncier, but it'd be naturally be more greener, so there wouldn't be as much spin. So they're battling kind of the inside edge rather than the outside edge a little bit more. Um, so that's kind of one that where the sweep shot kind of gets put away a little bit more, just because you feel like the stumps come into play. I think when it's spinning more, it's a little bit easier to play the sweep shot because kind of the margin for a perfect delivery to land in line to spin it enough and hit the stumps is quite small. Whereas if it's not spinning and just sliding on, they kind of can land it between fourth stump and middle stump really and have a really good chance of getting you out of IBW. But yeah, I think also like when you play them in Sharjah where it's really low, it's probably the hardest place to play them. Whereas you play them in Abu Dhabi where the bounce is true but the wicket's a little bit slower. There's not much spin there, so it's a little bit easier to play them in Abu Dhabi than it is to go all the way to Sharjah and where those wickets are low and they rag.
I might pivot back to, I guess, your early life as a cricketer as well, and ask you about your parents when it comes to playing different sport. Was there aspects of psychological approach to, for example, golf or tennis, where your parents imparted some knowledge to you that you applied to come sort of universal principle that you're able to apply to your cricket that helped you from a young age?
Yeah, I think probably the two things that they really harped on about is definitely having fun, and not being outcome based. I've been very lucky to have parents that didn't put pressure on me to do well, if that makes sense. They always just kind of harped on the enjoyment side. And then on the other side of it, the process, I think it's something that stuck with me throughout my whole career is that they harped on training processes, making sure that you do the right things kind of. I know it's so silly, but like my dad's so old school, as in like it doesn't matter how far we're going, if even if it's around the corner, that place is half an hour away and we won't be late. It's like silly things like that. It's like always being punctual, making sure that I had the right stuff, and then making sure you turned up to practice and gave 100%, and practicing more than actually playing because that's where you actually can grind and find out a lot of things about yourself.
Yeah, I think if you had that knowledge imparted to you in regards to being process oriented, that definitely takes a lot of weight off your shoulders. Because I've talked with this with a lot of people as well when it comes to youngsters where they have a lot of pressure to perform because their parents are putting these expectations or making them work really hard in a way where they have a very result based outcome mindset, and that can be very detrimental to a kid's confidence, right? So I think those tools and that kind of knowledge is must have really impacted you positively from a very young age. And regarding golf with your dad, was there any technical aspects about golf that he shared with you that you used with your batting? Because everyone knows like a lot of cricketers play golf. They're really into golf, and I've sort of read stuff. I'm not like I've done golf. I'm not super into it in that sense. So I don't know the technicalities of golf, but I know that, for example, having a strong, base is important, and having like a swing from shoulder to shoulder also helps with getting maximum, I guess, velocity onto the ball. Was there anything like that kind of told to you from a young age because of your dad being a golfer?
Yeah, I definitely. I think the correlation between golf and cricket is really slim. Besides the enjoyment factor, and that us cricketers have so much free time that we have nothing else to do besides playing golf. But yeah, I think from the beginning he was always just about enjoyment, and I think psychologically, I think you can do a lot more damage to a person or a young adult in terms of if you always only happy when they're doing well, all of a sudden, you know what I mean? That person will feel that, geez, I'm only good when I'm doing runs. My dad only loves me if I'm scoring runs. And I think that's a tricky place to be in. And I think even now in my career, when I do well or don't do well, I only look for four people that message me, you know, it's my mom, dad, brother, and one other, and that's about it. And the rest of the people, like people will, I've realized in my career, that when you do well, you're on top of the world and everyone reaches out to you and everyone's big mates. But when you're in your dark places, when you're injured, when you're not scoring runs, those messages dry up. And it's only the same four people that keep messaging you when you're coming back from injury, when you've had a lean patch. And I think those are massive things. Is that you can when you're a younger kid and your dad kind of puts pressure on you to do well. I don't think it can do well for you as a person, because that's all you're going to strive for is, oh, I have to do well for him, instead of being like, oh, actually, well, I just enjoy it. I really want to have fun. And yeah, if I do well, that's just a bonus.
Yeah, that would be definitely traumatic if a child is thinking that I only deserve love when I do well, and every other situation, if I don't do well, then the love isn't there. That would be pretty, like,
Yeah,
that's
it's
very
pretty
traumatic
heavy.
for
Yeah.
a child.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to. I mean, that's so important. So I guess you're very blessed in that sense that you didn't have those kind of expectations on you, or that pressure on you. So definitely allowed you to flourish in that sense. And so it's interesting you mentioned, South African players like Rabada, Ryan Rickleton as well. I think you said that Rabada was a few years older than you. So were you interacting with them? Were you playing alongside them from a younger age? What was your relationship with them like?
Yeah, so KG was 4 years older than me, so he's the same age as my brother. So he was decent friends with my brother, but I wouldn't have done any cricketing with him at all. But then with Ryan, Vian Mulder, Ricardo Vasconcelos, and those type of guys, I played maybe 2 or 3 years with them, depending on who they were, because Ryan was 3 years older than me, and Vian was two, so I got a couple of years with them. And then there's a few guys that have played like SAA and domestically, like Marcus Ackerman that I played with, Josh Richards, Wadila Makwetu. So like all in the school team, there's 6 guys, there's 7 guys that would have been playing SN19, playing Lions franchise cricket, and now have gone on to play for the Proteas, which is crazy. And yeah, I think obviously the one thing with having those guys there is that there's always someone to chase. Like they're being a little bit older, Vian being an all rounder that has always been kind of a few years ahead of me, has always been great to try chase whatever he's done. And Ryan put a lasting legacy in at Saints, he scored like something like 15 or 20 first team hundreds. And yeah, and then all the batters were just trying to chase that. And then Vian was scoring hundreds and taking fifers, so it was trying to chase him in that kind of stuff. And I think you look back and you realize how lucky you are to kind of be in that environment where, like, it's not even a school environment. Guys are going to national camps and underage national camps and stuff like that, and are playing and doing really well. So they kind of just naturally bring that back to you, and it's able to rub off on you.
Yeah, definitely. I think if you have people close to you or people that you work with that are excelling in their cricket careers as well, as you said, like that would naturally rub off on you and want to make you do better and sort of, in part, I'm sure you would be learning from them and vice versa as well. And so, as well at that age, did you have any sort of influential coach that, taught you the foundational aspects? It could be of your bowling or batting, or guided you along your young cricket team journey at that time?
Yeah, I did. Bongani and Daba, he is the Pretoria Capitals fielding coach and the SA Women's fielding coach now. He was the school coach, the first team coach back then, and I would have gone to him from roughly about 12 or 13 years old for lessons, and I still go back every year back to South Africa when I visit friends and family back in South Africa. I go and I train in South Africa with him for a block of 3 to 4 weeks. And yeah, it's really key, I think, for me to go back to my fundamentals, strip it back to my basics, and work with him for that little block. And I think it puts me in good stead. Yeah, he's a phenomenal coach. I can't speak highly of him enough. I got Sterlo and Andy Balburney Paul Sterling, and Andy Balburney to come with me back to South Africa, as well as Neil Rock. They came to train for a bit too. So it's been really, really good. I think that just shows how much I kind of value him, and to have Sterlo say that he really enjoyed his time working with him too was just a kind of a nice validation to have, that when you have someone that you trust so much in your game, and someone of his stature goes and trains with him, and finds great value out of him, it's great to have that.
And you also played for South Africa under 19s. What was the training regime like at that time? What sort of work were you doing in order to, get to that position where you're playing for South Africa under 19?
Yeah, so obviously you'd have the normal school trainings, and then I think then announced that squad maybe 6 months out from the tournament, or from the tour. I think it was West Indies came first, and every winter we'd drive to Pretoria to the South Africa High Performance Centre and train there once a week on a Friday, which was really really cool. To go to the University of Pretoria, where the High Performance Centre is. Well, I actually subsequently went to university because of. And the facilities there were great to get, video analysis, to be able to bowl there, to work with the bowling coach, to work with the batting coach, to hit balls, to be slung balls, to kind of do that is amazing. But I think the pinnacle of when you're growing up in South Africa, the pathways is to play the under 13 domestic or the regional team, play for the Lions. When you play under 15s, go to that week, then go to your under 19 week. And I think that's the big thing. I think the pinnacle is the Kaya Majola week, which is under 19 week. And then there is also a 50 over comp called the Cubs week, which is like a franchise tournament for the under 19 cricketers. And then from there, S under 19 gets picked from the Kaya Majola week, and then they go on their trips. So as a young kid, you kind of put your pressure on yourself to perform in that week. But even though I'd say people know who you are beforehand, and they kind of have a gist of who they want to pick, but it's always good to put out some numbers and kind of test yourself against the best in that regard in the country.
And it wasn't actually too long where from the under 19 South Africa team, you made your debut for Ireland, which I think would be roughly 3, 4 years after made a debut for Ireland in 2020. So, what was that journey like, transitioning into the Irish team? Because I read somewhere that you had a conversation with someone that made you realize that you're eligible for Ireland. So walk us through that journey, how that panned out, and the transition from South Africa to Ireland.
Yeah, so I've always had an Irish passport growing up, and it's been great to have and have the Irish heritage. So it was definitely not a thing that growing up I thought, oh, I want to, like, I'm dead set on playing for Ireland. It was kind of growing up when I was about 17. Ireland came and trained and played against South Africa and Australia in a tri series in South Africa. And I trained with Ireland then and just said, listen, guys, I have an Irish passport. Would like to come down and train, just have a look, see what you guys are about. And they graciously let me come. And then a couple of years later, when I was at the University of Pretoria, they came again for the qualifiers for the 50 over World Cup, I believe. And again, was able to play against them. Unfortunately, did quite nicely. And I was chatting to Niall O'Brien, who's my agent, and he was wicketkeeping at the time. And I just said to him, listen, I've got an Irish passport and I'm thinking of coming over to play a bit of club cricket. So he just said, listen, we'd love to have you. We can arrange a club to sort you out. And kind of it was my initial plan to just go over kind of in the winters and do a summer to summer in the southern hemisphere, summer in the northern hemisphere, and just experience a new culture and a new way, and kind of live in Dublin for 6 months and live in Johannesburg for 6 months, and kind of just a way to get away from the cold in the southern hemisphere, and to grow my game. And I got in touch with, well, the head coach Graham Ford at the time got in touch with me, and he just said, listen, we're looking to kind of play Namibia in South Africa at the end of the year. Would you be available to come and train with us and maybe play? And that was for the A team. And I said, yeah, I'd absolutely love to do that. That sounds really, really good. Unfortunately, I was able to take my opportunity, scored a couple of 50s, and did very nicely. And then from then on, they were like, right, well, we want you back in Dublin to start training with the national side, and kind of just being involved in the environment. So just after my 21st birthday, I left to Dublin, moved in with a lovely family, and I was going to just play the summer and be a pro for one of the clubs. And within about a month, I was training with the national team, and I just was just really happy to be there. And then they said, listen, we're going to pick a squad of 25 people to go to Southampton to play against England. And I was like, okay, cool, that's great, good. Wish you guys all the best. I'll be cheering from here. Good luck. And yes, to my shock, I was picked in that big squad. which was really cool to be 21 years old and flying over to England to obviously then it was a COVID bubble, but it was really cool just to be like, oh, I'm going to be a part of this environment, going to be able to go over there and learn and train every day, and it'd be really really cool. And then we played a warm up game, and I managed to again do nicely, maybe get a 40 odd and take a couple of wickets. And then I wasn't selected for the warm up game against the Lions team, and obviously I didn't mind at all because I didn't even expect to be there in the beginning. And post that Lions warm up game, I got a knock on the door from the skipper Andy Balbirnie, just saying, "Listen, we wanted to rest you for this game, and you're going to play the first ODI against England in 2 days' time." So that came to a bit of a shock to me, but it was really really cool. So I had about 2 days to kind of wrap my head around getting out there and playing against England.
And also, I think it was the second game where you came into bat at 5 for 28, if I'm not mistaken, which is pretty crazy if it's like your debut game or your first. I think it's your debut game, might be your second game.
Yeah.
And then you scored 59 runs to take Ireland to a total of 172. So walk us through your experience prior to that game, before you're going to make your debut, when you're told that you're going to play that game. What was the emotions like? How are you feeling from a personal standpoint? And yeah, what was your game plan? Going into that game, and yeah, walk us through also like going into bat for 5 for 28. Not many people do that, especially if you're batting down the order. You don't want to be in that situation necessarily, especially on debut. So yeah, walk us through that little period.
Yeah, obviously, I think it was crazy to look back on, but I remember just getting the call up, just being so chuffed and ringing my family. And obviously, they were over the moon. But I think it was like when you're so young, well, so young, a couple of years ago, when you're making your debut, I think you're so naive to whatever. You have no scar tissue from any previous things, and you're just kind of in awe, and you're just so happy to and excited to be out there. And I think I speak to George Dockel a lot about this, is that like situations and the world have a funny way of making things happen. And I think a big thing is there's one thing that you taking your opportunity, but also there's ways that opportunities are presented to themselves. I'm not a person that strikes at 250, 300 and clears the rope and bats at 6 or 7. I'm a person that takes a bit of time and rotates a strike. And throughout my whole, I'd say, kind of youth cricket and throughout my career, I've been a person that kind of is a little bit of a crisis man. When the chips are down, to knuckle down and kind of drag us out of the mud. And I've always been a person that loves that kind of challenge, and I think those type of challenges and the toughest conditions bring out, I'd say, the best in me. And yeah, so I think that kind of opportunity arose itself in the right way for me, and I was just grateful to take it. But yeah, walking out to bat at 5 for 20 odd is never ever great. But yeah, I have the same kind of basic game plan for Test cricket and ODI cricket in general. When there's those tough conditions like that, it's really easy because the game plan is so simple. It's just staying in your bubble and trying to identify what the threat is and how you're going to combat that. And if your skill sets and strengths already combat their super strength, then it's perfect. But otherwise, if their strength is gonna work into something that you're not that strong at, then it's about adapting your game plan and finding a way to kind of get off strike and go away from them trying to get you out. But yeah, going back to that game, yeah, I was batting with Kevy, and obviously a veteran of Irish cricket, and he makes it look so easy. So he was just like, "Oh no, it's a lovely wicket. Just back yourself." And to be fair, it really was a really nice wicket, but it just had enough in it, and somehow every time the ball deviated off the seam, we kept nicking it. So, yeah, I just try to build a little partnership with him, and I think when you realize that they can only bowl 10 overs on the trot from each end, and there's gonna be a changing bowler, and then eventually there's gonna be a break in play, and I mean, you're not far away from building a partnership, and it's one ball at a time, and I think that's the biggest thing when you're in those conditions, when it is super tough, is just managing the next ball. The previous ball doesn't matter and the following ball doesn't matter. But if you can just navigate that next ball and get to the end of the over, and then all of a sudden you can see you can string together 5 overs, 10 overs, and all of a sudden you have a 50-run partnership, and the runs will come. especially in those type of things. If you can kind of, what's the word? You got to fight or flight. You got to decide: are we gonna kind of sit in here, or are we gonna counter punch? And I think when two guys get out trying to counter punch, then you got to know you got to rein it back in and get back into the nitty gritty.
That's really interesting. You mentioned when the chips are down, that might bring the best out of you at times, and that's how you define, I guess, the way you play cricket as well, where you do well in those scenarios. Is that something you feel, that trait or quality that you were describing? Is that what would you boil that down to, nature or nurture? Where you do you feel like you're born with it, it's natural to you, or do you feel that it's something cultivated because it could be your parents or that kind of sporting environment that you have been a part of, that you mentioned, for example, playing with the likes of Ryan Rickleton, etc. Like, what would you boil that trait and characteristic down to?
Yeah, it's an interesting question and probably one I haven't really thought that much about. I would say I would say it's probably a bit of both. I'd say you definitely are either born with it or you're not. Obviously, I think you can nurture it in a certain way, because if you're in that situation more than enough times and you start doing it more often, you'll have the belief that you can do it all the time. And I think it kind of like stems back to when I was younger. I would say that I was never ever the superstar in any team, if that makes sense. I was never ever the person that, wow, he is like got all the talent, or he is the next superstar. And I think I was just part of being that, if you always want the team to do well. And I think that is the big thing, is I'm a person that loves team environments, and if I'm in a good environment, I will die for anyone. And I think that's a big thing, is I've been a person that really just loves the team, and wants a team to do well. And personal accolades for me aren't really important, as long as, like, some of my favorite games of cricket, international cricket, have not been when I've done well. It's been when we've had big wins and we've done cool things. And I think that's probably, if I look at my top three games, I haven't done well in any of them. Well, relatively well in any of them. It's just been team performances, and I think that's what drives you.
Yeah, like I think in a way it also puts less pressure on the person itself when it comes to focusing on the team's needs. Like, if you're someone who's very individualistically driven when it comes to scoring this amount of runs and doing this and doing that. I mean, it varies obviously with person to person. Sometimes that motivates someone to do really well, gets the juices flowing, but that can also be detrimental to other people because it puts too much pressure on themselves to score. Whereas if you think from and I've heard many players talk about this as well, like, if you focus or redirect the attention to the team's needs rather than your own individual accolades, then it puts less pressure and you're more likely to do well. So that's really interesting. You brought that up as well, and it's interesting as well in the next ODI match. A very similar situation where you had to come in at, I think it was 5 for 78, not as bad as 5 for 28, but still 5 for 78, and you scored 68 runs as well. So very similar situation, and you're scoring again. What did you feel? Was it like, oh my gosh, it's like deja vu or something? And then how did you go about that innings as well?
Yeah, I think obviously, to touch on that thing about like the team orientated people and self, like, individualistic people too. I think different roles in different teams make a big difference. I think if you're a top three batter, I think the kind of individualistic approach is kind of a more approach that will suit those type of people, because it's more of a set template. You're going to bat, and if you do well, the team does well. And I think that's where I think individualistic people can do really well, because any person in the top three that wants to score hundreds and needs to score runs, makes it really good for the team. But I think when you slide slightly lower to the middle order, I think you have to be a lot more fluid, and I don't think there's as much glamour in batting at 5, 6, 7, in T20 and ODI cricket, because you're having to, like you say, do kind of the grunt work, or the unsung hero work, which is kind of where the more team orientated people would kind of slide into. And then in terms of, the second ODI, I think it's, once you're in some runs and you're in a bit of form. I was fortunate that pre that those two games, I was in really good touch. I was bowling nicely and batting nicely, because there's nothing worse than you waiting for a debut, or waiting for your chance in the first team, or the club side, or the domestic side, and you have to wait a while, and then by the time you actually get your debut, you're actually not that much in touch. and then you know what I mean, you can't actually take that opportunity. So again, down to timing, I was in a good bit of touch, and yeah, it just allowed me to settle in and kind of just bat my normal way and give myself a few balls and not have to try clear the ropes. And then, yeah, kind of just got out there and ran off the same form again. And yeah, it was nice to get a few away again.
And what's really interesting as well, I think within the year or maybe the next year, um, there was a moment where you took 4 wickets in 4 consecutive deliveries in 18th October 2021 during Ireland's opening match in the T20 World Cup 2021 against Netherlands in Abu Dhabi. So that was first bowler in that World Cup. I think it was the third in T20 international history, joining Lasith Malinga and Rashid Khan to do that. You dismissed Colin Ackerman, Ryan Tenderskada, Scott Edwards, and Van der Merwe in that. So you were Netherlands were 51 for two, and then they were 51 for six. So that must have been I don't know if that's probably your highlight of your career, but walk us through that game and that performance.
Yeah, actually, it was crazy. I think just the way it petered out, I bowled my first over and I bowled terribly, like genuinely, like just it wasn't coming out the hand nicely and sort of turned, ball changed ends for me. And yeah, so I managed because of like the way it worked. It was reviews, so it wasn't like bold, 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 or bold and caught. So it was like consecutively. It took a lot of time that over. I remember taking like I would say like that over took maybe like 5 minutes, which is such a long time to bowl an over. Because the first one I bowled a bumper, it didn't really get up and kind of just like went down the leg side. And I was like, he's definitely hit this. And no one else wanted to review it. And I spoke to Bell, and Bell was like, no, we'll review it. So that was the first one. And then we had a preset game plan to tend to Skada, that like early on he gets trapped in front. So it was just hunt poles and try get a little bit of tail back into the stumps. And luckily, yeah, just kind of he got his feet caught up a little bit, and I kind of like slid one under the bat and got him in line, which was really really cool. And then same thing once that is working, because I'm a little bit skiddy and a little bit shorter. I can sometimes slide the ball. I kind of beat people early on, just at the and trap them on the crease. So just said the exact same thing. I'd played Scott Edwards that summer before, and I knew that he likes to walk into the channel. So I knew if I bowled the ball real full at the stumps, there's a chance that I could slide it under his bat again. And yeah, thankfully it worked, and we had to review it though, because yeah, umpire thought it was just sliding down the leg side, but thankfully it worked again. And that was kind of how it was like. Didn't feel like a hat trick because in the moment it was not out, so it was like, oh okay. And then you kind of had the elation of the review, and then afterwards, which was really really cool. And then the next ball, I tried to bowl the same ball and kind of just dragged it a little bit, and it was a wide half volley that Rudolph van der Merwe kind of dragged onto the stumps, and it was kind of just a little bit of luck, which was really really cool. But no, I wouldn't say it would be my fondest memory. Like I said before, like they're really cool things to do. But yeah, I think games of cricket where we've had a complete performance or done some really special things would be up there and past that. I think maybe when I look back at my career, it's a nice accolade to have, but at the end of the day, like it is what it is. Like it is just a game of cricket, and I'm hopefully someone will get 5 and 5 and break the record.
It's really interesting because you talked about the strategy that you executed when it comes to, for example, you said Ryan Tendescada and also Scott Edwards. So, how much strategy does the team talk about when it comes to preparing for certain players? Prior to the games, does it that kind of talk about specific strategies gone for the week in before the game, or does it kind of happen, I guess, spontaneously, maybe during the game where you're noticing something? Because sometimes you can plan all you want, but then in the game it pans out a little different, whether it be weather conditions or pitch or whatever. So I'm just curious about the nature of how much strategy talk that happens amongst the team or team management, or even within training amongst the bowlers, for example, in the lead up to the game.
Yes, obviously stats and analysis has come in loads. So we would definitely have about a plan A and plan B about how to attack a batter within their first 10 or 20 balls. and how we're looking to get them out. If we're going to set them up by pulling them across and then go with their poles, or if you're just hunting one of their weaknesses, if they're not that good on the short ball or they're not good with the ball angling back into them. But I think with a little bit of experience, we have a bowling group now that has kind of been together for the last 3 or 4 years. So I think you can, like you said, you can look into all these dismissals and how they get out. But if the conditions in front of you don't actually allow you to attack them in that way, you've got to go to whatever the conditions work in. So it's a balancing act between playing the conditions and seeing what's in front of you. Because let's just say someone is a person that nicks the ball when it nips, but you're playing in charger and the ball doesn't go off the straight there, and you have to bowl straight. So then, therefore, you got to adapt your plan and kind of vary it and see. Okay, well, we'll try and nick them off for the first few balls here, but then okay, we're going to go back to what the conditions tell us, and bowling the ball straighter is going to be the best way to get them out. Same thing as if someone's good on the terrible on the hook shot, and you're bowling in a really slow wicket. There's no point of banging it in, because just because they're bad on the hook shot doesn't mean they're a mug. They can still hit the ball if it doesn't get up. So yeah, that's kind of having to juggle the two between having your plans and also playing what's in front of you. And also sometimes I think we get caught up into it too. Like coaches will just be like, "Oh, default is like he doesn't hit slow balls for six." Well, he's assuming like, oh, his percentage of hitting slow balls for six is lower than when he does of pace on. But like, it doesn't mean he doesn't hit them for six. And when he's in his best form, he can still hit those for six. So it does get a bit tricky when people can just be like, oh, well, the stats say this, and it's like, well, yes, I get that, but also we have to play what's in front of you. How's this guy doing? What are the conditions like? What are my fields like, and how am I gonna kind of do this?
I think that's really interesting, when it comes to, because obviously I'm just a normal average club cricketer, so we don't necessarily deal with stats analysis and all that kind of data that you're referring to. So it's really interesting to kind of ask you those specific questions just to get some insight about how that sort of works. Because my background, like done like mathematics and stats and those kind of subjects in university, and correlation doesn't necessarily mean causation, right? So essentially, like as you were mentioning, where maybe someone could struggle on the short ball, but it could be there could be a day where they don't necessarily know what gets them to the best position when it comes to their style of batting or them as a batsman in order to play the pull shot. So suddenly maybe they could be playing the pull shot really well because the conditions might favor them in a certain way, but that maybe side of things may not be evident or might not come up in the start or on the stats or the data alone. So I think it's like, from my personal standpoint, not that it matters much, but I think it's always good to obviously be balanced, right? Like obviously have a look at the data and the analysis, but also be flexible and play the conditions in front of you, because I've actually listened to a lot of interviews, like for example, a lot of franchise teams, because they could be more business oriented, and sometimes in the business world, all you need to do is analyze the data and the stats, and that kind of gets you to what you need. But obviously, cricket's a lot more different because of in the psychology behind batting, and there's so many variables that can come into play that can't be factored in by current data and stats alone, right? Like, because for me, it's always like, it could be a day where a player plays really well a certain way, but like, how do you know that through stats alone that okay, this day his psychological mindset was at 100%? Like, I don't know, like how you're meant to quantify that in data alone, if that makes sense. Like
Yeah,
you can't.
100%.
Yeah,
That's also like that's the whole point about sport, though, isn't it? That it's unpredictable. You always see WinViz on the bottom of the screen there, but like, so if it's over 50% for the one team, they don't just shake hands and say, "Okay, cool, well, we've won now." It's because there's so many things. Like even looking at that, look at Maxwell's innings. The percentage of Afghanistan winning there would have been 95% for most of the innings. And then all of a sudden, one human being goes and does that, which defies all things. And the same
yeah,
with like, let's just say if you're looking at the stats and their probability, well, what's the word? Their strike rate on the short ball is 80%, right? Or yeah, 80 out of 100. So they're going to score less than a run if you bowl a short ball. But there's times where they're not going to hit the short ball for 20 balls in a row, and they're going to hit it for six than the next ball. And that's what gets you those numbers. You know what I mean? It's not just oh no, he's just going to hit it for one run every single time. It's like when he is in form or is batting well, he hits those for six. And I think as a bowler, I found that I'm a big man that loves the stats and loves looking at people's strengths and weaknesses and then mirroring that up with what I do. What are my strengths? And then finding what I can do to combat them and whether I'm going to risk doing my strength, even if it is against their strength, and knowing that my super strength will beat theirs. And if I miss execute, I miss execute. That's what happens. You get hit for four or six. That happens. But if I execute, I'll be okay. So I think those have been the big things for me in the last while is that, for example, if I'm a person that doesn't really bowl wide hole at the death, but you have to bowl to a person like Karen Pollard where you can only really bowl wide hole. Do you try bowl wide hole and not have the percentage of accuracy that you should have if you bowl straight hole, but he also might not have the percentage of the accuracy to hit them for six? Or do you back yourself to bowl the higher percentage of a straight Yorker where he has the higher percentage of hitting you for six if you don't execute? And I think those are the things that kind of become into the nuances of the game of how do you be able to set your over up to bowl your best balls against the best in the world to give you the best probability of doing well. So will I bowl a wide slow ball to bowl the next ball straight Yorker? Will I change my field, you know what I mean, to set a wide hole field to bluff him to buy me more margin? Or do I set a wide hole field and just bowl wide hole and back that I'm good enough to execute bowling wide hole against this person, even though they know what I'm going to do? And I think that's the hardest thing is when you're playing against the world's best, you know, your margin for error, if you're telling them what you're going to do, is crazy because it's so small because they know where you're going to bowl, especially for a wide hole. But if you can set a split field, that's why the split fields come into the modern game so much now, is because as a batter, you can't line up a certain ball. This bowler's got 3 or 4 balls he can bowl, therefore their margin for error it will be higher than if you just go, right, I'm going to bowl wide hole and you got to try hit that for six.
Those are some really key insights. Thank you for sharing them. Before I kind of comment what you mentioned, sometimes I'm not gonna lie, it's just a comment, but WinViz is such a scam. Like I'm watching sometimes, like so many times, it's like, oh, this team 10% chance of winning, and then like 10 overs later, suddenly it's like because they started doing well, then it's 80%. I'm like, there should be some accountability for claiming that there's only 10% chance of winning. You can't just change your number like when the situation is different, right? So that's one thing. That's why I like it. It's a bit of a scam. But the second thing regarding what you mentioned about marrying up your strengths in accordance to what maybe when you're looking at the data, seeing what maybe the batsman is good at or not so good at, you sort of work your game accordingly. In the lead up to sort of strategizing what to do with said batsman you're going to face, um, what do you do from a personal performance standpoint prior to the game in order to ensure that you're at your best in that time? Because as I mentioned, like we were talking about, like in data analysis, you can't quantify if a player or a batsman is necessarily like at 100% like mindset, because obviously we're human beings, we're not like robots. But what do you do in regards to preparation? And because I think Shane Watson calls it the ACT model from memory. It's like knowing what happens in your game or what you have to do in order to perform at your best in the game scenario. It could be, I don't know, like bowling X amount of times in training, or I don't know, going for a gym session in the day, or waking up early doing, I don't know, yoga, whatever it is. I'm just curious, like what sort of preparation do you put in order to ensure that your bowling's at your best place during the game?
Yeah, so obviously if you work on your loads and you have the right perfect week, for example, that you've bowled enough overs before the games, I wouldn't bowl the day before. If I've played at that ground before and I've bowled from both sides, I wouldn't bowl the day before. But sometimes my ideal thing would be 2 days out. I'll bowl roughly if it's a T20, I bowl about 6 to 8 overs. Bowl slightly with the new ball, do some power play work on my slow balls, and then I do some target bowling and death bowling. And that would be my main template for bowling. And then the day before, I'll just have a hit, and then on game day, just play the game. But with franchise cricket and even international cricket, when you're changing formats and stuff like that, you don't always get to see the ground 2 days or 3 days out before. So then it's kind of knowing exactly what I can strip back and what I can lose before the day before, or what I actually have to do in terms of like my non-negotiables. And I think obviously the best thing is for preparation for batting and bowling. The day before, I'd have a nice hit and then do some range hitting on the ground. I think that's always the best thing to do because see how far the ball travels, see the dimensions, see what you kind of need, and also just to clean up your swing. But then when it comes to bowling, it's just knowing that I'm nailing my Yorkers and nailing my slow balls. And that would be 2 days out, and then the day before I wouldn't do anything.
Regarding range hitting, I wanted to ask you about what sort of fundamentals are you looking for within practice to ensure that your range hitting is at its best? Like, is there a particular cue that you're looking for? It could not, maybe it doesn't have to be hyper fixated on the outcome of the distance or how far you hit the ball, but it could just be watching it as closely out of the bowler's hand as possible. I don't know. I just wanted to ask about your particular cues to ensure, what your to know that your range hitting is at its
Mm.
best or where it should be for before the game.
Yeah, so actually, I've come back from injury recently, and I literally just finished training now, and I did maybe like half an hour of just range hitting. And there's only three things I really work on: one, my sequence; two, my front foot; and three, my back path. Those are the only three things I'm looking at. And if I do two and three, one and three, two looks after itself. So the main thing is like the sequence of getting your hands up, then your front foot contact and shifting through the ball, and then making sure when you are doing that the back path is kind of straight down the ground and not like across yourself. So it might be a little bit technical, but those are the three things that kind of sit with me. Is that's all I'm trying to do is make sure that I can get my bat up, and then my front foot, because it's exactly like baseball, is that you see them load and then their front foot comes, and it's that sequence of once that front foot comes, you can drive your power through the ball. So that's kind of been the three sequences or three things that I'm working on right now is just to do, and kind of it's my reminder that whenever I go do it, that's what I need to do.
Is hip pivot part of sequence?
Yeah, so that's the same thing as I naturally have that, so I don't have to like kind of think of it, if that makes sense. My main cues are to drive my left foot into the ground, because when I do that, then my hips will go through, if that makes sense. And then when my hips go through, it's all about making sure that my back path is straight down the ground or as straight as possible.
Bat path meaning like the bat should finish over like your shoulder, is it?
No, no. So more like where I want to hit the ball, where that should be the bat path. I know Steve Smith talks about when he's batting normally that when he's talking about hitting through the covers, that his bat handle should show where the ball's going to go, if that makes sense. So that's making the same thing as where I want the ball to go for six. I need to swing from the top of my swing through there and over my shoulder. So if I want to hit the ball over cover, I mustn't swing straight down the ground and cut across myself. I must swing straight over cover.
Right. Okay. Would that imply just getting my head around it? So, for example, if the ball is outside off or way outside off, because a lot of players will play try to play the ball through cow corner, for example, as opposed to
Yeah,
hitting it over cover. So, what you're saying, would that mean that, or that would imply that that ball is meant to be hit over cover and that your bat is in that direction of cover?
100%. Yeah, and not trying to hit the ball that is wide line to like long on or cow corner, because then you're pulling across yourself, allowing that to go with it. That's just like the mental cue of when I'm working it, because obviously in the game, naturally instincts take over, and sometimes you do hit the ball that is a wide hole straight for six anyway. But that's just because that's their natural back path.
Is that to ensure the efficient use of your energy and your effort into the ball? Because we see a lot of plays like, regardless of where the ball is pitched, they'll try to hit it cow point anyway. If that makes sense, so I'm just trying to
Yeah,
understand it from that perspective. Where are you doing that specifically because that's just the efficient use of your energy and power? Because that, I guess that would make sense, right? Like if the ball is being pitched outside off, if you're able to sort of technically do it in a very correct way, you see a lot of people that aren't necessarily the strongest actually have a really beautiful lofted cover drive without having much power behind it. Is that the logic behind why
Yeah, pretty
you?
much. Yeah, yeah, 100%. Because obviously, if you don't have the long levers or the bat speed, like like the West Indians are freaks because they'll hit a ball that is on the wide line over long on or cow corner because they one have levers, one have incredible bat speed. Um, I wouldn't have the long levers, so it's more about being efficient and finding ways to kind of clean up my swing because obviously if you the most efficient swing is straight down, straight up and straight through. Not cutting across it to the leg side. But we're human, and naturally you swing around your body. Therefore, the ball, your bat swing will always be from right to the left side.
Right. So when you're describing the bat swing should be like straight, like in that sense, like
Yes, and then obviously depending on the length, you can naturally ride with it towards the leg side. But if it is a ball thrown on off stump, your bat swing should be from top straight through and go straight over the side screen. Whereas, not normally what happens if the ball is on off stump or even fourth stump, the natural swing will take the ball to long on.
right. Yeah, that makes sense. It's
Yeah,
really interesting. I'm thinking opposed to like when I'm trying to power hit, and I actually like have like basically one shot in my game, and it's that shot like playing down the ground, like hitting it down the ground. Like I can hit any ball down the ground basically, like with power. I don't know, it's just very natural. So
yeah,
that's really interesting, kind of what you're mentioning, because I guess from a orthodox perspective, it's better to be trying to hit it straight down, because obviously like most balls are kind of going to be directed towards your body, right? So naturally you should be looking to, if I'm correct, play it down the ground. And I would say like even from a cricketing perspective when it comes to fielding positions, and I found this personally as well because I love playing because I don't have an orthodox. I wouldn't say my swing down the ground is an orthodox straight drive. It's a bit of like a golf swing, but it's just like straight down. And I find that the most effective way to hit boundaries because no one places fielders directly behind the bowler. You know what I
yeah.
mean? It's just like kind
Unless you're playing Karen Pollard, then you have to put one there.
of, that's it. That reminds me, in the World Cup when Liton Das hit this big six. I didn't hit the six, but it was going wherever. And Jason Holder was like down at the boundary line. He got caught, but it was like he's like so tall. So yeah, unless you're in that situation, but that doesn't necessarily happen in club cricket. So fortunate for me.
Yeah,
But
exactly. Yeah.
so with power hitting as well, because you mentioned sequence front foot. So the front foot is something that you also focus on. Like, is it because a lot of players talk about shoulder alignment or getting a shoulder towards the ball, but then people also talk about feet movement. Are those one of the same in that sense? Because it could be seen in that way, or is that very specifically just front foot for you? Because people might talk about like letting the ball come to you and leaning towards the ball, or getting your shoulder towards the ball. People talk about getting foot towards the ball. So I guess for any normal club cricketer, it can be confusing as to what you do. So I just wanted to hear your thoughts about that with that sort of technical aspect of hitting.
Yeah, so that'll be just that's just basically for me, if that makes sense, because it's more that like basically what I do whenever I go down to the club, or when I start hitting balls again and I want to work on my swing, I'd start with my left foot off the ground and get someone to lob me some underarm balls, and then make sure just before I striking the cricket ball, my left foot lands, and then you can feel like that's like a position of power, if that makes sense. Um, but like 100%, I fully agree that your left side should be in, and your head should be in the ball, and your head shouldn't be up, if that makes sense. Those are just like the fundamentals. But that's just that front foot to me is kind of my way of making sure that my whole sequence works and I can get the most amount of power out of my body that is possible. Because if my front foot is not like pushed against the ground, I'm losing force and therefore losing power.
Yeah, that makes sense. And when it comes to also, it's interesting you talked about loads with your bowling, and I assume obviously as cricketers you have gym work that you do all that sort of stuff. Do you do any specific gym work in order to help with your range hitting?
Yeah, so like our S&C will put together different programs depending on like what type of player you are. If you're an all-rounder, bowler, a batter, if you're a technical batter, if you're a guy that needs to literally just clear the ropes, or you're a person that hits the ball far. I always joke with the S&C saying that there's a direct correlation to bicep size and six hitting ability, but he doesn't find that funny when I when I'm trying to bench more. But no, definitely a lot of stuff is to do with a lot of core, a lot of like side planks, side holds, and then a lot of cable rows and like abductor holds and stuff like that, just to work on core. And then every now and again we do speed tests, which is a bit of fun, which is just literally trying to pull a cable as fast as you can to get the most amount of points.
That's really interesting. So, I guess, would you say the science currently says that working on your core the most, and I assume that's connected to that hip movement potentially, is where you can generate more power with your range hitting?
Yeah, I definitely think obviously levers are a massive thing. So that's not really gym. That's just generically size wise. If you're taller, you'll have longer levers to swing the bat. But to be honest, I'm a firm believer that big biceps do hit big sixes. So the stronger you are in terms of upper body, it can't hurt too. But I do think if you're not a person that is naturally genetically gifted in terms of big biceps and big chest, if you can do a bit of that and mainly work on your core, because that's why you see some of the smallest cricketers hit some, like that are stroke players, hit some really good shots, because timing is everything. It doesn't matter how strong you are. If you can time the ball for six, it will still go. It doesn't matter if you hit the ball 110 meters or 55 yards and it's just over the rope. A six is a six, doesn't matter how far it goes.
Yeah, definitely. Like I can only speak for myself. Like when I took gym seriously, prior to then, I couldn't really hit a ball for six. I don't think I even hit a ball for six in my life until I started gymming. And definitely, like I used to be, I started benching like 45 kg, 50 kg. Now I can bench roughly 80 or 90. And as that progress happened, I definitely found like I'm hitting a lot bigger, so bigger sixes as well. So that correlation I found from my own personal standpoint is definitely there. So I also wanted to what also before I move on to I guess specifically there was a game where Ireland defeated South Africa, which I want to get into. Was there any sort of insights that you wanted to share in regards to range hitting that we maybe didn't talk about?
No, I don't think so. I think the fundamentals of keeping your head down and swinging it as hard as you can is pretty basic. I think sometimes you forget that is that like you got to hit the ball for six. Sometimes I can get a little bit too caught up on the technical side, and trying to be a bit too technical in terms of like technically correct. But I think the faster you swing the bat, the further the ball will go. So if you're a club cricketer out there, a kid or whatever, try hit the ball hard and it will go for six.
Exactly. And in 2021, South Africa toured Ireland, and in the second ODI, excuse me, Ireland won by 43 runs. So Ireland made 290, and South Africa made 247, and it's a very strong South Africa team. So walk us through that experience at the time. What the strategy was, because it's clear that from what we've talked about, like there's obviously a lot of thought when it comes to strategizing before the game and coming up against a strong South Africa team. What was the sort of strategy talk in the lead up to the game? What did you work on personally in order to ensure you can play your best against such world class players? And yeah, walk us through the emotions after that victory, because that must have been a very special memory.
Yeah, obviously, we played them in Malahide, and Malahide's been a really good ground for us in general. I think it just kind of suits the way we play. The wicket, if you bowl about 130 kilometers, is a little bit sticky, but if you go a little bit faster, it actually comes on beautifully. So it's been really great and a great hunting ground for us in general. It's kind of a place where it's a fast scoring ground, but if you bowl the ball in the right area, there's a bit in it for everyone. So we've really enjoyed our ODI cricket there. And obviously we had our plans to the players, and we executed really well. Personally, I was coming back from ankle surgery, so it was my first game back, and I hadn't played in ages, so it was really nice to get a few runs, especially against Africa. Um, they're a really good side, and I had one or two mates playing in the team, so it was really cool to kind of sit and have a beer after the game and kind of share a bit of bit of banter and just a bit of like memories with them. It was really really cool to be a part of. And I was just pleasing to. I was out for about 6 weeks or so. So it was nice to kind of get back in there and kind of get back straight on the horse and score some runs.
And the runs you're talking about, I assume you're referring to that big partnership with Simi Singh, where he made 100, he scored 54 run a ball. What was it? Because I think you came in, it was a similar situation. I think you came in, it was a bit of a collapse as well. So walk us through that situation, how you approached that game.
Yeah, again, similar enough. Like batting with a few guys that I've always enjoyed batted. Sorry, always enjoyed batting with Simi loads. He's a stroke maker and hits loads of boundaries, so it's always nice to watch on the other side. But yeah, I think when you get into those situations again, it's just making sure that you're surviving the first 10 to 15 balls because that's when you're highest of risk of getting out, and then after that in ODI cricket, they kind of go away from getting you out and kind of go away to containing you. And then it's all about making sure that you're disciplined to score the runs. Obviously, Norkia was bowling a bit of heat that day, and Shamsi was spinning it both ways, which was a nice little test. But it's always good fun to kind of get out there and kind of face the music.
And also, there was a series against New Zealand in Dublin as well. And when I was looking through the scorecards, it was like crazy games. Like I think it was the first ODI. New Zealand won by 1 wicket, like with like one ball remaining. So it literally went down to the wire as well. I think in that game you had scored 43 runs as well, so big contribution to get Ireland to 300. Ireland 300, and then New Zealand, chased it down essentially on the last or second last ball. So what was that emotions like? Because beat South Africa as well at home, and then you're having these close games with New Zealand. That must have been fueled a lot of confidence for the team, a lot of self belief as well. Do you find from a maybe even a psychological standpoint, able to sort of back your abilities as a result of these results?
Yeah, for sure. I think, to be honest, as a group, we know we're at a stage now where we've played together a large portion of us, a core group of like 8 or 9 players that we've played together for the last like maybe 6 years, 5 years, and we know that basically, if we turn up on our day, we can genuinely beat anyone, and that's like not even. I know people cliche say that whatever, but like we know if we play our best cricket, we will beat them. We've turned over England, India. We haven't turned over India. We lost to India off the last ball. You know what I mean? We lost to New Zealand off the last ball. We beat West Indies in the ODI series. We beat New Zealand in games, South Africa in plenty of games. Like so, it's not a fact. It's not a kind of just a wishy-washy statement. We actually truly believe that if we play our best cricket, we can either run the best teams in the world close or even beat them. And it's shown in the last few years too. But I actually met up with Michael Bracewell in the PSL a couple months ago, and it's probably the first time I've spoken to him since he did that because he basically clawed them out of the jaws of defeat to score about 130 odd. I don't know if you can get it up there and see, but I think it was like 130 or 140. Could even be 150 off about 100 balls to literally hit maybe 20 runs off the last over for them to win, which was crazy. It was an amazing innings, and he's a really good player. But I hadn't spoken to him for a while, and when I saw him in Pakistan, I just said, "Mate, I can't actually speak to you anymore because you gave us nightmares for loads of time."
Yeah, it's very underrated as a player because he's a good spinner too, Michael Bracewell. And that's interesting. You talk about. I wonder, like, Winviz would have been like 1% at that point before he came in for New Zealand to win because that was like, you guys are so on top, and that's crazy. Like cricket's like that, unfortunately. And so, in terms of, I think not too long after, there was also the T20 World Cup in Australia in 2022. So I'm based in Australia, so I went to a few of the games. So what was your preparation like in the lead up to that World Cup? What sort of work did you do personally? And there were some really good performances for Ireland in that World Cup as well. So walk us through the preparation, the lead up to that World Cup.
Yeah, so we're actually fortunate. We got to Sydney maybe 10 days or a week before we had to leave to Hobart, and we went to Randwick Randwick Petersham Cricket Club, and we trained there for a few days. Obviously, it was that time where it was just really weird in the Australian summer where it was just raining galore. So we didn't get that much summer training in, but it was nice to be out there. Managed to get a few bowls in. We played a warm up game there, and then we played two warm up games. One at the MCG against Namibia, and another one just against the club. So it was great prep there, and then we headed off to Melbourne for the warm up game, and then off to Hobart for where we'll be based for the qualifiers, which I didn't think Australia in the summer could be cold, but jeepers, Hobart is freezing in the summer. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, even in Melbourne, because that's where I'm based, it gets really cold. Sydney is getting colder these days with the rain and all that. So yeah, climate change, unfortunately. But in the game against Scotland, was really good game in the sense that you scored 72 of 32 balls, um, and to guide Ireland to victory. So, what was your game plan in that particular match? Because you came in at a tricky period as well. I think it was like what 3 for 57, something like that. So, was there any particular bowler you were targeting? Were you trying to set the platform up for, I guess, the later batsmen as well, though, to come? So what was your approach in that game?
Yeah, so obviously it was more the batting combination. I bat really, yeah, I find it really nice to bat with Lorcan and George. And when I got in there, Lorcan just got out, and I was able to bat with George for a good while. And I think we have like opposite skill sets. He hits the ball, he's tall, he hits the ball down the ground beautifully, and he enjoys like pace off and picks up slow balls beautifully. And then I'd be the opposite of, I hit very square of the wicket and enjoy pace on the ball. So I think we just in general we've had a lot of partnerships beforehand coming into the end, but we just bat really well together and we complement each other. But I think when you get into a stage, it was roughly about I think we needed about 11s or so, and we kind of just made the assumption that I think Mark Watt was bowling, and he was kind of just hanging it outside off, and I realized that like I'm gonna have to take a risk here, and I'm gonna have to try get him to bowl to where I want him to bowl, and I'm gonna have to get him to bowl faster. So I eventually just had to make the play, and hit a slog sweep, and it came off nicely, and that kind of just kickstarted my innings. I was maybe like 8 off 8 or something like that, and realized that now I need to have to kind of pull the trigger here and start to go. And then I think there's not many times in your career where you kind of get into this flow where it doesn't matter where they bowl or how they bowl, you're kind of reading the game beautifully and you're just kind of hitting the ball and seeing the ball well. And yeah, luckily I got into one of those states, and George and I kind of ran with each other where he kind of got off to a flyer and allowed me kind of just to play my game. And then I think towards the end there, I kind of just got in a bit of a heater, and yeah, anything I kind of touched kind of turned to gold, and I was just hitting some nice fours and sixes. So it was really cool to be a part of. And yeah, it was nice to. I think we lost to Zimbabwe before that one in a game where we shouldn't have lost. Yeah, we just kind of just didn't do the right thing. So it was nice to set the record straight and kind of go again, and beat Scotland, which set up the last game pretty well.
And as well, I think it was the next game you had beat West Indies as well, and that kind of shook up the World Cup because I don't think because that meant that they didn't qualify for the World Cup, if I'm not mistaken. So, what was that approach in that game? Like, did you have specific batting plans or bowling plans for specific of the West Indian players? And what was the dressing room camaraderie like after such a convincing win against a strong West Indies team?
Yeah, I think that was probably one of the cooler nights we've had. Definitely had a great like buzz and vibe. I think the way we did it too was just really good. It was just a great bowling performance. The guys, everyone was just on. To be honest, it was just one of those games where, as a team, we rocked up together and did everything right. And then I think we still thought that with the wicket and the ground dimensions, it was definitely really chaseable. But when you get into those high pressure situations to kind of chase any total down, doesn't matter how big or how small. The power play is key, and the way Stoller came out and Lorcan batted together, pretty much just killed the game straight away. And then we knew it was done, which was really really cool, and we had a big night, put it that way.
In Hobart as well, must have been super cold night. Everything closed as
Yeah.
well.
No, no, we managed to find an Irish bar and they stayed open for us for a good bit. So the nice little fire there too, so it was warm. Thankfully, we had about 4 or 5 days before our next game, so we were able to just kind of enjoy the moment and kind of yeah have a bit of fun.
Yeah, like that was, even for people that don't necessarily support Ireland or West Indies, like that's that game itself. I'm sure like the whole cricketing world was just so impressed with the convincing nature of that victory, and as well, like I can't remember England's campaign, but Ireland beating England would have been. It's interesting because England ended up winning the World Cup, and Ireland were one of the few teams that actually beat England in that tournament. So walk us through that game, that preparation. Because England at that time, I think Josh Butler was in really good form as well. So did you have any particular strategies to him when it comes to from a strategy point of view?
Yeah, so it was a weird one because we had played another game in Hobart against Sri Lanka, and I actually did my side. So I actually had a side strain. So before the game, I didn't think I was going to play because the head coach said to me, "Listen, if you're not going to be able to bowl, we can't pick you." And I said, "Perfect." So when I literally through the warm ups, I tried to bowl and I couldn't bowl. And he said, "Listen, well, we're going to keep picking you." So I kind of I wasn't in the bowling chat at all because I was injured and I didn't think I was going to play. So I was really upset that I was probably going to be flying home the next couple of days. But yeah, thankfully managed to be strapped up and kind of took some painkillers and got through it. But yeah, I think when you get to those world's best players and they don't have a technical flaw or way of kind of a telltale sign of how to get them out. It's all about doing what you can do the best and then limiting the damage. Obviously, it was a wicket that offered a lot for the seam as it started to rain and it was green. But I just remember there's two things that probably stick out to me the most about that game is one that Mark Wood was bowling the fastest I've ever faced in my life. It was genuine rockets. Him just kicking off the side screen and running down, and it just flying down there was pretty cool to kind of witness and yeah, it was really cool to test yourself against someone that bowls, in absolute heat. And the other thing was we actually dropped a catch, two catches in 3 balls just before the rain came, and the Barmy Army kept playing the trumpet in the circus tune. So the first one went down, I was like do do do, and then the next one was doing the doing the circus like do 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 do. So I remember standing on the boundary being like, "Oh my god, what has my life come to? I've got the Barmy Army, literally playing the circus tune as we're dropping catches." But yeah, I think it was really, really cool to do that. It's definitely one of the best games to be a part of. Yeah, like I said, I didn't really do much in the game, but yeah, definitely one of the highlights of my career to say that I've beaten the world champions during that campaign at the MCG during a World Cup was pretty cool.
I saw a clip recently. I think it was a Josh Butler, Stuart Broad, one of them. They're talking about how, for example, if someone drops a catch on the field, how it keeps replaying it on the big screen, and then it kind of your head kind of sinks even further down the ground because you're watching a replay after and over. You can't just kind of move past it, right? Because the whole ground's making a certain sound in reaction to what they're seeing on the big screen. And what you described was, well, regards to the Barmy, I'm making that the circus tune as well. I can only imagine it from a player perspective how that kind of might psychologically, like, you have to like consider that part when it comes to even trying to do your best, and then it's like all these things happen along the way that kind of make it a little difficult, as opposed to obviously playing club cricket. Like sometimes when you drop a catch, you don't really know. Sometimes, like, depending where you're on the field, you don't know if it's a dolly, if it's it was a straightforward catch, and you kind of move on because there's no replay on the big screen. So
Yeah,
is that something you sort of learn to deal with in general? Like, how do you kind of manage that situations as well?
yeah, I think it's crazy because I think fans and commentators and broadcasters too get caught up in just replaying it as this is a cricketing event. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? It's said like abuse and stuff like that. People kind of forget that we're human too. And you know what I mean? We feel the same things everyone else does, you know. Like if you're a club cricketer and you drop a catch, the next one that goes up, you're a little bit more nervous over it because, you're not sure are you going to hold on to it or not. So I think those things still run through your head. But I think again, the more you do it, you realize that like you are going to drop catches as long as your intent's good and your technique's fine. Like you'll catch the next one, and you just got to move on. You know, there's nothing worse though when you go through a patch where I went through a patch where during 2021 in Abu Dhabi. I don't know why I couldn't catch a ball in Abu Dhabi. I don't know if it was the sky or something like that, but I maybe dropped 4 or 5 catches during the trip, and like I couldn't believe it. It was like you could have thrown me underarm ball to me, and I would have dropped it. I was just in such a bad space. But then, you know what I mean. All you got to do is just. I'm such a process person, so I went back to just getting loads of balls, getting hit loads of highs, load of flats, and then all of a sudden, once you take one in the game, you kind of forget about it then and you move on.
And as well, you mentioned Mark Wood and facing him, because I'm going through a commentary right now, and you hit, I think, 2 boundaries, what it looks like, off Mark Wood. So the first one, it said he was bowled full and wide. You use his pace and hit the 4 over backward point. The second one was you shuffled across outside off stump and scooped it over fine leg. So I really have to like kind of ask you what was because it's interesting because you talked about his pace in a way where it's like you face him like you face such a quick bowler. How did you kind of deal with it? How did you manage in that situation in that time? For example, was it the fact that you're honing in his arm, watching the ball really closely out of his hand in order to try to get able to kind of read the length a little earlier in order to negotiate with that pace. Because obviously, with the second boundary, it looks like you sort of thought of a different strategy to make use of his pace and change your game plan in a way to do something a bit different to counter that pace. So I just really want to get an idea of what was going through your mind when it comes to facing Mark Wood.
Yeah, so obviously when someone's bowling sharp, it's more about making sure that your movements are small, because you don't have as much time. Um, and obviously, thankfully, he's got a really nice viewing action, so you can see it the whole way. He runs in and you can see it the whole way, so it's quite easy to see, even though it is rapid. You see it kind of the whole way. And the reason why I went to scoop was because the leg side short boundary was real close there. It was maybe only like 50 meters. So I realized that in T20 cricket, you either hit boundaries or you get out. There's no point of surviving there. I mean, we're trying to set a total that they can't chase. So therefore, you got to hit boundaries. And I felt when I looked at the options, looked at how fast he was bowling, the boundary size, the dimensions, even though fine leg was back and deep square was back, I knew that if he bowled the ball and he's roughly going to bowl the ball between knee high and chest high towards me because of I just hit him for a boundary to the offside. So I knew that the probability or the likelihood of him coming straight and naturally would happen, and therefore that's my best option to get a boundary. So it's using a bit of I wouldn't say stats or anything like that, but just kind of feel of the game of knowing that this is what he's more likely to do, and how can I effectively get a boundary away.
And in that World Cup, when I've spoken to players that have played in a World Cup, they talk about the opportunity to mingle with other cricketers from other nations. Did you have that opportunity? Like, did you have an opportunity to talk to someone that you may have wanted to speak to about certain things about their game that you can kind of learn from? Was there any kind of opportunity like that you took advantage of during the World Cup?
Yes, obviously it's really cool. You do get to mainly bump into a lot of the players all the time because you're either in the same hotels or doing the same media or doing the grounds or something like that. But we met up with Australian guys in one of the bars one of the days. We just bumped into them for a little bit, which was really nice when we had a good few days off, which was always nice just to kind of just do some normal things with them and just rub shoulders with them. But in general, not really, to be honest. I would keep more to myself when it's more franchise stuff. When I go play franchise cricket like the PSL or BPL or anything like that, I try then to kind of see who I can chat to because there are long days and you can really talk about cricket. So that's kind of where I normally use them. But other people did find a lot of success in actually just going to speak to a few people. The one person I did speak to was Kane Williamson. I chatted to him post our game and managed to actually nick a shirt off him, which was really sound of him. But just, yeah, I've always liked the way he goes about his business, how technically sound he is, but yet how efficient he is in all formats. So I just chatted to him for a bit there. And David Miller was the other one that I spoke to just about like batting towards the end. But that wasn't during the World Cup. That was just prior to that when we played them in a series. So it was very nice for him to share his thoughts and see what he does because he obviously has honed that number 5 and 6 spot for international teams and franchise teams around the world. So kind of any kind of tokens you can get from him or golden nuggets was always good. But you end up just chatting a bit of cricket and seeing what their thoughts are.
You mentioned the BPL Bangladesh Premier League and PSL where you got an opportunity to speak to other players. So I might as well just talk about that because from what I saw in BPL 2023, in your first game you scored 45 off 25 balls as well. So that must have been a really interesting period. I don't know if that was your first sort of franchise team that you played for. So I wanted to get an idea of your preparation, the lead up to the Bangladesh Premier League, what sort of experience you had with the pitches as opposed to maybe other subcontinent pitches that you played in. What was that experience like, and what adjustments did you make for the BPL? I'm sure like you probably would have practiced the sweep shot, for example, or is there different aspects about your bowling that you try to work on in relation to the pitches? Because I follow BPL because my background, I'm Bangladesh, but born and bred in Australia. So I follow the BPL and I'm pretty aware of like Dhaka pitches being very different. And then I think in Sylhet or Chattogram, it's a lot more flatter. But Dhaka is like really different wicket. I've heard people talk about it being difficult. Well, I don't know if it was different when the year that you were playing in BPL. So I just want to get your thoughts about all of that.
Yeah, 100%, Jess. I've been fortunate to play in Bangladesh quite a bit. I did a Wolves trip, a national trip, and then I've been to the BPL 3 times, which has been really, really cool. But like you said, the Dhaka wicket, I don't know what it is, but there's like moisture underneath it, so it becomes quite like tacky. So it spins loads and nips a bit, and it's really hard to. It's like two-paced in nature, so it's quite a hard place to bat. Whereas you go into Sylhet and Chattogram, it's drier and the wicket's already flat. But yeah, obviously the main skills is more, I think, more game plan, to be honest. Knowing that where your boundary options are against spin and seam, and then executing those, and then where you're going to get off strike and how you're going to get off strike. So I think those are the main things that kind of in the last couple of years that has stood me in good stead is that I have my few boundary options against spin, and I know when to take them, and then it's just about executing them. And then when it comes to bowling seam, obviously when you get there, it's going to be more a fact of kind of going to change ups and Yorkers and stuff like that. And then when you're in Dhaka, it's the complete opposite. It's pretty much just bowling length because it seems so much. So it's all about holding your length and holding your grind. And yeah.
So who were you sort of, because you were playing with many Bangladesh internationals. Max O'Dowd was in your team as well. I'm sure you would have faced him a fair bit as well. So you would have had an opportunity to speak to him. So who was it in the team that you're sort of interacting with and working with when it comes to plans and strategies, and had the opportunity to talk to and learn from as well?
Yeah, so obviously it just depends which year it was, but during that year, I think it's really key to speak to the locals, because I mean, there's going to be 8 local guys playing against them, and then the 4 overseas. So obviously the overseas are always normally the same guys, and the information you have on them is pretty key. So you're pretty used to that, but it's about getting the local knowledge of who the local players that are good, and who kind of is doing really really well. Yeah, I know in the first year I had Tamsin, who's really good batter, left arm batting plays, opens a batting for Bangladesh now, and he's really good. He was great knowledge in, and then we had Chowdhury, the left arm seamer who played for Bangladesh against us too. So he was really good. And then in my last year now, when I was just back, we had some really good players like Iftikhar Ahmed, Akif Javed, both played in my PSL team too. And then Alex Hales joined us. And then I think also it's not just in your team, to be fair. I think because everyone's in the hotels together and you're sitting and chatting and you're working with different players, you're able to chat to whoever is around, and you can get a chat about ideas. David Milan was there last year, and we got on really nicely and chatted a lot of cricket too. So it just finds like there's different times where you can touch and talk to different people. Like I bumped into Sean Tate during breakfast, and managed to spend a full morning with him and Mickey Arthur, just chatting cricket and talking about their experiences and their game plans and what they're working on and how they're trying to get their bowlers to do different things.
And which player would you say you were sort of most impressed with? It could be from a professional standpoint, could just be or the knowledge about the game or insights that they have. Who were you most impressed with? It could be one kind of overseas player and one local player.
Yeah, I think obviously the local players, there's so many good talents there, but I think Tuscan Ahmed, I think somehow his international record doesn't show how good he is. I'm not sure, like just in general. Like I think he's got so much skill, so much pace, and he's really the spearhead for Bangladesh. And whenever I've played him, he's done really, really well, and he's just a quality player, to be honest. And then obviously the overseas guys, they're all very good, man. They're always top draw, but when you can't go away from the West Indians, I know. What's his name came? Romario Shepherd came to our team too for like 2 games or 3 games and hit like 50 odd of 15 balls or something like that, ridiculous in one of the games. Just hitting sixes for fun and then bowled rockets. So I think whenever you have those guys in your team, it's really, really good. I think last year the one person that I was really impressed with was the left-hander Kushal Shah, who plays for Pakistan. Bowled jet left arm spin for us and genuinely just hit sixes for fun. So it's always great to have him in there. It was just like whenever left arm spin came onto him, it was like, right, he's hitting 2 sixes, it's over. And for the whole PSL and the whole BPL, that's all he did was just hit sixes for us.
Yeah, Kushal Shah, I was watching him for some time. He did well in that BPO, as you mentioned, PSL, but I think also in the Global Super League, I think, the last one. So now he's like playing for Pakistan, so he's made use of his sort of performances as well. And so that's really interesting you mentioned that too. And I also want to touch on a few points before we wrap up the show. One would be maybe shifting to, actually, before I shift into the 100 you scored against Sri Lanka, I don't want to jump to test now, it's a bit weird. I'll stick to the T20 theme at the moment. But there was a T20 World Cup in America. So that was a really interesting period because it was like the first World Cup in America. There was a lot of hype about that. And so what was your experience at that time in that World Cup? And what was the preparation like going into that World Cup? Because people talked about, I think, for example, the New York wicket was, I don't know if tacky is the right word, but it was a very different wicket. It was a bit difficult to bat. So what was your experience with the conditions as well in that World Cup?
Yeah, I think as a group we found it really, really tough because we were staying in New York and it was like a 2-hour drive to any kind of thing. And so when we got there, there was no real training facilities to do anything really. So we had to drive an hour and a half to bat on the same wickets as the stadium, and we deemed them not safe to play on. So we ended up getting some throws and just doing some bowling loads. And I think India and South Africa were the same. They didn't face any bowlers on those wickets. So the India game, the wicket was, I know it was from Australia originally, so it was fast and bouncy, and it was green. And it wasn't I don't want to say it wasn't laid properly, but it wasn't even, put it that way. So that was probably the toughest I've probably been about because the outfield had also just been laid, so it wasn't hard. So if you hit the ball into the ground on the outfield, it wouldn't go out the inner ring. It would just plug. So that was kind of really frustrating. So that's why you saw all the low scores because 1, the wickets weren't great, and then 2, the outfield pretty much was just sand. So that, I don't have great things to say about that thing. I think as a fan and the idea of the spectacle of having it in New York was a really, really good thing. But I think the practicality and kind of the execution just wasn't there.
And there was a relatively close game against Pakistan, and you'd face the Pakistan Pacers as well. So what was your experience in that game facing the likes of, I think it was Haris Rauf, Naseem Shah? I don't know if you got to face Shaheen Afridi as well, but how was that experience facing those bowlers?
Yeah, it was good. I think, to be honest, the person that doesn't get enough raps in that Pakistan team was Mohammad Amir. I think he is an absolute jet. He shapes the ball both ways, and he's such a cunning cricketer. Like, he's always one step ahead of you. If you think he's going to bowl, like, it was a green seamer and he's shaped the ball both ways, and then he'll bowl a slow ball. You know what I mean? It's just like he'll be one step ahead of you because you're trying to do something. So he was really tough to face on that wicket because he has that zip with him. And then Harris Ralph and Shahid bowled really well, but yeah, when guys bowling 90 mile an hour, it's just all about just trusting the basics and getting in line. Didn't really work. I think I hit one up the chimney off about 15 balls. I just chewed a few balls, but it was a really good game. Again, I think we just beat them in Dublin before that, so we did feel like we could turn them over again, which is always good for us. Pity we didn't really do it there. It would have been nice to end the trip on a bit of a high, but I think we've all, us Irish cricketers, have all parked that T20 World Cup in New York and America firmly in the back burners, and kind of don't want to delve into it too much too.
And I wanted to jump to the 100 you scored. So you scored 111 off 229 balls in Test cricket against Sri Lanka, in Sri Lanka. It's really interesting because I think, as I mentioned earlier on the podcast, like there's a tendency of seeing like a lot of scorecards where you do well in these kind of subcontinent conditions. So, what was your approach in that game against skilled spinners of Sri Lanka? And did you like bring out the sweep shot a lot? Like, was that your sort of game plan at that in that game? So, how did you go about your business and getting to that 100?
Yeah, I think we just come off the back of playing a test in Bangladesh in Dhaka. I kind of didn't really get in or didn't really find my feet there. So it's more about just spending some time in the middle. And obviously, there's stats that show that playing in goal, that the sweep shot's really, really effective. And I think for me, I just really focused on having a good forward defence. The wicket was really, really good. It offered a little bit of spin, but it wasn't like it was an absolute Bunsen burner and it was ragging sideways. But there was a little bit in it for the spinners. I felt like I just defended really well and then was able to sponge a single or two. And then my natural instinct of when it went up and towards the leg side, outside leg, was to sweep. Once I had two guys back there, or because of the state of the game, they only really had one guy back for a long period of time. So it's just kind of negating their best ball. I think that's the biggest thing in Test cricket. It's identifying how they're trying to get you out and trying to negate that for sure. Because there's no real time pressure on you to score runs. So you can take your time, and if you can negate how they're going to get you out, they're either going to choose to go away from that plan or to carry on with that plan. And once they start going away from the plan and kind of going just to the normal stuff, then you know you're winning, and that's when you're on top.
Yeah, like it's really interesting how like you have that kind of set game plans and kind of making it, like for example you said about having time in the middle. Like I'm sure from your background, the sort of wickets you're used to, like South Africa or Ireland, adjusting to these subcontinent conditions, there's a different sort of situation that you may have to like adapt at international level, right, as opposed to being trained accordingly throughout your, I guess, youth cricket period there. So how much would you say you had to kind of learn on the job as you're playing international cricket? Because I personally found like, there is that tendency to be like, it depends obviously as a cricketer and their background and what their experiences have been. It could just be playing in subcontinent conditions their whole life, and suddenly, I don't know, they have to tour New Zealand and it's like different foreign conditions. And that's when you have to kind of adjust things about your technique, do different things, I assume. So have you felt that you're always kind of learning on the job, or do you feel like you have your core set of skills that you can bank on any conditions and you sort of stick to those? Like, I'm sure it's not just one formula, but I just wanted to understand from that end how much you have to adjust on the job.
Yeah, no, I think so. I think the common misconception is that like once you get to international cricket, you have it all figured out. But I think it's about the people that are able to adapt and learn on the job, and also who can do it faster. Is basically the key to being the success, especially with touring the whole time and getting into different conditions and stuff like that. Is one, getting some past players' knowledge. I think that's the biggest thing. Is you can look at stats from different grounds and see what is what, but I find for me the best thing is to chat to people that have played there before and just get their thoughts on what they think. Like for example, we were very fortunate that Rangana Herath had a little bit of a chat to us when we were over, and just said like, this is how the breeze works like this. If this breeze happens, you got a ball spin from this end. This is just how it works. When you're coming from here, If the rain comes from over there, the ground's like this, it's not going to spin. And if it does spin, it's going to spin the whole time. So it doesn't matter about this. And in terms of game plans, I think you can delve a little bit into the stats. But I'd have my rough template and then look at how the practice facilities play, how the wicket's going to play, and then kind of adapt it from there. I think obviously in Test cricket, there's no restrictions of how fast you need to get the runs. So the only way you can learn is being out there and spending time on the wicket. If you can spend 50 balls, 100 balls there, the next time you come to bat in the second innings, you're going to be better for it. And the same with batting the nets. Just spending time hitting loads and loads of balls to adapt your game plan and kind of trial of error. Seeing if the sweep shot works in the nets. If it does, then it's good. And if you can't run down because of different things, or maybe if it stays a little bit low, so you must get forward to the ball and not back to the ball. But yeah, it's always that constant learning and tinkering with your game plan and your technique to kind of get the maximum out of your game.
That's crazy what you're describing when Harith was talking about the nuances about the ground. Like that's mind blowing. Like obviously, as people that just kind of watch cricket, like they're not aware of those level of insights that go on when it comes from a strategy perspective before the game. So talking about the wind and the rain direction and this and that, that's crazy. To be knowing those kind of intimate details about a ground in order to get the best out of a player. Like that's the level you have to be at when it comes to thinking about the game, which is really, really insightful that you brought that up. And so I'll ask a few questions before we wrap up the podcast. Appreciate your time. It'll be more centered around like your batting, approach from a mindset perspective as well. So like what goes in your mind. Like I've talked to others and they talk about, it could be visualization. It could be about meditation before the game in order to get the best out of their batting, or they have specific processes as they're playing. As they're out in the middle, like in between balls, they're doing something in order to, check out of the game and then try to conserve that mental energy for when the bowlers come in so that you're focusing as much as possible, trying to pick up the length earlier. So I just wanted to get a gauge about your batting process, what goes into, your batting, like how you approach it when you are batting and if you have like a mantra or any sort of things that you do prior to the game as well to ensure that you're at your best shape when you're out in the middle.
Yeah, so obviously I'd normally do my analysis the night before, the day before, just going through bowlers' footage and stuff like that. Obviously, if I've played the team or the bowlers enough times, I won't have to go through the footage again unless there's something new. Like someone's got a new delivery or a new action change or something like that, so I wouldn't really change it then. And then a few superstitious things like crossing the boundary rope a certain way, and then when I get out to the middle, I wouldn't say my mantra, but the main thing I'd focus on is pushing my head straight and watching the ball. I think it's the most underrated thing, but that you can do is you forget to watch the ball when you're out of nick. And that's actually watching the ball so much so that you can tell the seam, and I think that's what I try to focus on the most is trying to watch the ball for the first 10 balls or so and just get into the game and face and bat on ball. I think most of my mental side comes from reading situations. So because you're back in the middle order, it's not actually about kind of this one shoe fits template of seeing this and doing that. You know what I mean? It's adapting to the situation, and I think that's where the mental side comes in. Is how am I able to adapt and what process can I put in, and then am I going to attack or defend or sponge or rotate the strike? And I think that's where I'll have my normal game plan, but the reading of the situation is the key.
In regards to watching the seam very closely out of the bowler's hand, is that something that you've actively tried to do? Because it's harder than when we talk about it. Like everyone kind of maybe talks about it, but to actually do it is a different question because it's a different thing altogether. Because it's not easy to be able to be so focused where you're actually looking at the seam itself, right? So obviously it takes a certain level of training to get to that point. So that's something you've sort of honed from a young age when it comes to your batting. Was that your bread and butter? Or was that something that, because people talk about, they're just kind of watching the ball, but then everyone has a different degree as to how much closely they're actually watching the ball, even though they might say that they're watching the ball, right? So I'm just curious about how you, got to that stage of, being like, okay, I'm going to have to actively look at the seam of the delivery of the ball in order to, get my innings going.
Yeah, I think also it also gives you a bit of an advantage too. Well, you can gain an advantage of if I can see from your run up how you're holding the ball. You know, if you're holding it three quarters, if you're holding it seam up, are you slanting it in towards me? Are you slanting it away? Obviously, when it's far away, it's quite hard to see. But I try to do it too when I'm at the non-strikers, just get a visual to see because you're from the non-striker, you're even closer. So I can see, okay, is it tilted for an in swinger? Is it tilted for an away swinger? One of the things is a lot of the seamers nowadays bowl thumb off slow balls. So they like I don't have a ball here, but when they get into their gather, they take their thumb off the ball. So it's something you can pick up quite easily that that's going to be a slow ball. The only trick is then some guys go. I know Mitchell Stark does it. Is he goes thumb off, and then when he's about to bowl, he puts his thumb back on. So then you can't actually line him up. But a lot of guys, that's like a natural instinct or a subconscious thing that you when you're loading up they take their thumb off, then you can visualize that, and then it's easier to read a slow ball, for an example. So it's just kind of those nuances and small little things that you can do to gain yourself a little bit more of an advantage.
And is there situations where you can't actually see the seam of the ball because of, I guess, how the bowler has positioned the ball in his hand, or like I think it was Wasim Akram as well. Like he would, or someone they would cover the ball with their, if they're bowling with their left hand, they'll use their right hand to cover the ball, and then or you can only see the seam in the last like split second before it's released. So what do you do in that situation if you can't read or can't see the seam as clearly?
Yeah, I'm fully okay with that. That's okay. You know what I mean? The idea is just to watch the ball from when he starts running up all the way through to when he releases the ball down to when I hit the ball. You know, so obviously if I don't get the visualization, I'm still watching where his hand is, and then hopefully by the time it gets to where he releases the ball, I can see anything. But if I don't, it's still the idea of still watching the ball. You know, because the whole idea is theoretically you don't have to see it from when he starts running in. You only have to really watch the ball from when he releases it because that's when it really affects you the most. But if you can gather any information beforehand that will benefit you, then you might as well take that too.
And I got two questions regarding psychology. So, what do you do in between deliveries? In it could be a T20 or even a test match.
Yeah, it just depends what kind of mindset I'm in. Obviously, T20 is all about like looking at the situation and trying to dictate what you have to do. Do I have to hit a boundary? Do I not have to hit a boundary? What's the run rate at? Are we setting? Are we chasing? All the conditions where as test matches, it's the tempo is a lot slower, and it's just about trying to work out what that bowler is trying to do and trying to stay in your bubble. And I think it's okay if you get out your bubble. I think that's one thing that in the middle period, I'd kind of get like get a start, and then in the middle of when I'm on like maybe 40 to 50 runs, I'd be like I like tell myself to refocus and to focus more, even though I'm already in the zone. And then that kind of loses my focus. And then it's kind of like being okay with, okay, I'm okay with being out of focus for a second or two. Now let's get back into being focused, you know? Because like sometimes when you tell yourself so hard not to do something, then you do it, you know? Like, or you keep forcing yourself to do something, then all of a sudden you lose your focus. So it's kind of being okay with being out of focus sometimes and then getting back into it. I would definitely tap my back as a pre match routine or a pre ball routine in the same way, and that kind of just switches me on. And then I'd say watch the ball in my first 10 balls most of the time.
And as well, I know that you mentioned when it comes to batting, like for example, if there's a collapse and you have to come into bat, that sometimes might get the best out of your batting to the situation. But when if do you deal with nerves in the sense of like a lot of people um, struggle to kind of feel like they perform at the best because they're feeling a lot of anxiety or nervousness. A lot of people they say that their nervousness is more like excitement, so it might help them in a way. So I'm just curious about your relationship with nerves. Like, do you feel like you have to deal with your nerves a lot more, and do you have strategies around that if you have to deal with it?
Yeah, thankfully I'd be on the nerves of an excitement thing, and it would last maybe a ball. You know, like just maybe the first ball is just that like getting out there, being excited to face the ball, and then okay, cool, I'm through that. And once I get into my work, it goes away straight away. So it's more just an excitement thing for me. Um, and again, I think if you strip it back with those nerves, you can even look at what's the worst outcome. You know, the worst outcome is I get out. I'm still alive. I'm still okay. You know, obviously I haven't done well. That's going to happen. You know, and I think it's accepting that that can happen, but also being excited about what if in the best way. You know. what if I bat really nicely? What if I score 50? What if I score runs? What if I score 100? What happens if I put the team in a great position? It's really tough, but what happens if I'm the person that changes it around? What happens if this partnership does us really good? I think the narrative is something that is a big thing as a cricketer, is if you're so worried about the failures, like this, the reality is, as a cricketer, you're going to fail more than you're going to succeed. That's just a fact. So if you just keep looking at harping on the positives and the process of like, I've done my processes that will give me the best chance of doing well, and what if I do well? That's got to be the way forward, because you got to have, like you've talked about, what, 4 or 5 innings that I've been a part of in a 5-year career. So that's 1 a year. I've done really, really well, So like this, and I've played 30, 40, 50 games in a year. So it just shows that you are going to fail more than you succeed, and like you just got to be okay with that.
I think you're just being modest. I just picked certain ones. It's not like if I had to go through all your performances, it would be like a 4-hour podcast. So that's the only reason. So I
No, but it's true though. It's you know what I mean. It's how it is. As a cricketer, you are going to fail more than you're going to succeed, and that's just life.
And I wanted to wrap up on asking you about, you sort of mentioned Mark Wood when it comes to toughest ball, but that was like the quickest you've seen. But I wanted to ask, like, who has been the toughest bowler you face, and who has been, it could be like a teammate or anyone you've played with, who as a batsman you saw and you're watching them bat and you're just like, wow, like, you were really impressed by the way, they, for example, might have a lot more time on the ball as opposed to everyone else, or they just had something about them that was maybe a level higher than everyone else.
Yeah, so I think we've touched on it already, but Rashid has definitely been the best bowler I've faced in that regard. Like he's just relentless. And then with batting, we touched on the South Africa ODI series in Dublin, and one of the games we played, it was a sticky wicket, and Quinton de Kock just started leaning on the ball and timing the ball on the up. And I was just like, this is different. You know what I mean? Like everyone else is struggling to get it off the square, or, you know what I mean, getting beaten outside off. And it felt like he was having a net, if that makes sense. Like he got to run a ball 100, just batting normally, taking his time, and then try to hit every ball after that for 6. And got to about 140 and then got out. But it just felt like it was different. He hit the ball harder, timed it purer, and yeah, it was just like when you're bowling to him, if you went to his hip, it was 6, and if you bowled outside off, he cut you for 4. So yeah, those two for me, right now, has been a real standout, been like just different.
That's really interesting you brought up Quinton de Kock, because what you were talking about, he strikes me as the guy that, I don't know if he sort of follows the template you mentioned that you follow when it comes to range hitting, because he has that nice swing that kind of feels like he's just hitting it straight, but he's putting a lot of power. It's very kind of effortless, like you kind of described. So is he a guy that actually fits that model or that template you described about range hitting to the T? Because I think that he kind of does, the way he hits balls, it's like he's just hitting them down the ground, if that makes sense. That swing that he has, right? But I'm not sure.
Yeah, and again, like he's not the biggest guy, and he hits some massive 6s. But like again, like when he picks it up off his hip, the bat face is going through straight and picks it up over the leg side. And then when you go outside off, he hits through the covers. So yeah, no, I don't know what he does, but if he can give me some of that, I'd be chuffed.
Yeah, I mean, unbelievable player. So you've been on the podcast for some time, so I appreciate your time. Thank you so much. I don't know if you had any final thoughts you wanted to share before we put a podcast on the close, but we went through a lot of your performances and how you think about the game. Super insightful, so I appreciate your time. But yeah, I don't know if you had any sort of final thoughts you wanted to share.
No, just wishing you luck with the continued success with the podcast, and thank you again for having me.
No worries, anytime. Appreciate it. Yeah, it's like a sort of grateful to have the opportunity to speak to international cricketers like yourself to get these insights, because that's only why I started it, right? Like it's one thing just watching on TV, but to really understand the nuances of the game. Like we talked about so many things, like about data analysis. We talked about, I guess, for example, you're talking about Rangan Nahara talking about Sri Lankan conditions in that nuanced way. It's like things that you don't really hear as much, right, if you just purely watch the game on TV. So it's the honor is mine, so thank you so much. So if anyone want to check out the podcast, we're on you can subscribe to us on YouTube. We're also on Spotify, iTunes, and Apple Podcasts as well. So you can follow us on Facebook. We're on Cerebral Cricketer page, Instagram as well, TikTok. So we post all these clips and stuff like that. So for our special guest, Curtis Campher, and I'm the host, Tanzim. We wish you the best. Take care. Thank you very much.